native history is never taught honestly. Even blind folks can't see the hypocrisy. Land of the free, but our prisons are overcrowded. Maniwi Choni, man, I'm passionate to shout it. Will I change the world? I honestly doubt it.
All right, welcome everybody. You can cut the music. We can get started today. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Stories I Didn't Know filmmaker discussion. If you love the music, it is by a local Minneapolis artist by the name of Quito, who is actually part of our discussion today. So Quito, during a discussion, feel free to talk more about your music too if you want. Absolutely amazing. We are very, very welcome to have your music as our opening tracks for today. But thank you so much for everyone for joining us. My name is Kevin Yang. I am the Digital Engagement Specialist at Twin Cities PBS, and I'm very excited to have the opportunity to be today's moderator for today's discussion. I want to begin by thanking all of our partners who helped make today possible. Thank you to Moving Lives Minnesota, Twin Cities PBS, the Minnesota Humanities Center, and the team behind Stories I Didn't Know. A little bit about today's event. It will be a 1-hour event. We'll be starting off the panel conversation for the first half of today's event, where you'll get a chance to hear from the filmmakers behind the documentary, as well as 2 of the folks who were interviewed in it. And then after that, the second half of today's event, you actually have an opportunity to listen to each other and share some of your stories and reactions to the documentary. So there will be a lot of opportunities for you to both listen as well as engage. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Please turn off your camera and mute your microphones for the first half of today's event. During the breakout sessions in the second half of the event, you have an opportunity to turn on your cameras and unmute your microphones so that all of you can engage in conversation with one another. There will also be many opportunities throughout our event where we'll be asking you to put in reactions or type something into the chat box, which you can find on the bottom right side of your screen. So whenever those moments pop up, feel free to type those in there. If you have any questions or any reactions or comments, feel free to also throw them into the bottom right and put them in the chat box. And we will have folks help answer those questions for you. Today's event will be recorded, but the breakout conversations will not be recorded. So we also just wanted to let you know about that too. But thank you so much for all of you for being here today. We're super excited to have this conversation. And we're actually gonna start off today by showing the trailer to the documentary that was shown during the 2020 film circuit run. So we hope that all of you had this chance to see the documentary, and that will give you a much better perspective on the conversations today. But even if you haven't seen the documentary, there'll be many opportunities for you to take out nuggets from this conversation, and also opportunities after this conversation to watch the documentary in its entirety using the link that's provided for you during the registration process. So hope you enjoy the short documentary trailer, and we'll be right back to continue the event. So feel free to hit the next slide.
Hi, yes, my name is Rita Davern, and I'm from St. Paul. I'm a settler descendant trying to sort out a piece of land down here called Pike Island.
Who are my people? Where do I come from? And what is my dream?
I grew up with a lot of blank in my past, a lot of unknowns. I never heard anything growing up that there were Indians on the land great-grandpa settled on. I don't care what is in my history. I don't care what's good about it. I don't care what's hard about it. I want a chance to claim it and face it and learn from it.
The entire Minnesota rivers contained villages of Dakota people. We called that area Badote.
I'm gonna find out what the hell happened to the land that my family settled on and how it happened and why.
This is our history and this is where we are right now. Let's claim it and own all of ourselves, not own just this piece that we can't get over.
When trauma happened, it got passed down. So it's not over.
When people learn this story, it changes them.
Let's get angry and do something. To hell with guilt and shame. To hell with them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Such a powerful trailer and powerful documentary. You can hit the next slide. So for all of us, this is a nice warm-up question for everyone for a chance to have your voice heard. In the chat box, describe something in the film, or if you haven't seen the film yet, describe something in the trailer that you connected with. What did you feel? Feel free to throw that in the chat right now. We'll just take a few minutes to give you a few seconds to give you the opportunity to do that right now. Also, Ruben, feel free to throw in your SoundCloud or a link that folks can find your music at in the chat box too. I know there's a lot of really positive responses to the music you shared. Wonderful. I'm loving all the responses I see already in the chat box. Curiosity, the power of curiosity and wonder, the desire to feel equity, who am I, anger as a lifelong resident and having not heard these stories before. So many different reactions to the documentary or the trailer. So many emotions evoked watching it myself. Such a powerful documentary. Great. Feel free to continue throwing them in. We're going to move on to the next part of our event, where you actually get a chance to hear from some of the folks who helped make the documentary, as well as who are featuring in it. So you can hit the next slide. So we're moving into the question and answer period of our event today, where you have the chance to hear from the panelists. For folks out there, any point you have a question that you want to ask to the panelists, feel free to throw them in the chat box. So write out your full question and also write out who you would like to address the question to. We might not have the time to answer all of them, but we will do our very best to include whatever you want to ask them. And then my team members will send those questions over to me. And at the end of the panel discussion, we'll have the opportunity to hear some of them. So a reminder to all of our panelists, we have so many great questions today. We want to hear from all of you. So please try your best to also keep your responses short, as close to 1 minute as possible. Let's get this started. We can move on to the next slide. You can learn a little bit more about the folks who are on the panel today. So first person I want to introduce is Melody Gilbert. Melody Gilbert is an award-winning documentary filmmaker who has directed, produced, shot, and edited 8 feature-length documentaries that screened at noteworthy film festivals and been broadcast internationally. Melody is a longtime resident of St. Paul, and she is currently a professor teaching journalism and documentary filmmaking at Northwestern State University in Louisiana. Melody Gilbert helped make the film, so that is Melody. Next person I want to introduce is Ramona Quito Stately. Ramona Quito Stately is an enrolled member of the Santee Dakota Nation. She has a BA in Dakota Art and Culture and Master's Education with emphasis on teacher leadership. She's a project director for We Are Still Here, Minnesota, creating action for narrative change as it relates to those indigenous to this place, Minnesota. Welcome, Ramona. We are so excited to have you as part of our conversation today. Next up, I'm going to introduce Ruben Quito Stately. Ruben Quito Stately is a 21-year-old recording artist who also goes by the stage name Quito. Ruben is from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and is currently attending Augsburg University. Ruben comes from both the Santee Dakota and Red Lake Ojibwe nations. He has been writing and recording for the past 10 years. Ruben uses music to reflect on good and bad experiences while also validating the experiences of other Indigenous youth in order to create collective healing for others. Thank you so much for being part of today's program, Ruben. And our last panelist I'll be introducing is Rita Davern. Rita Davener is a 4th-generation Minnesotan with cultural roots in the Davern area of County Clare, Ireland. Rita worked as a communication leadership trainer for 20 years. Stories I Didn't Know was Rita's first film, and she recently finished a second film called Burn Girl that focuses on the Ireland part of her family history. Thank you so much, Rita, and let's give a warm welcome to all of our 4 panelists today. Thank you so much for being part of today's event. I'm going to start with our first question. This is primarily directed to Rita and Melody. What were the origins of this documentary? How did you all find your way into being part of Stories I Didn't Know? How did this amazing documentary start off?
Well, the name of the film, which Melody came up with, is so perfect because it is all about stories I didn't know growing up. And, you know, like a grandmother who came from Ireland, and I didn't know why she came. She came long after the famine or the Great Hunger. And I didn't know who she came with or why she came to this farm in Minnesota. You know, so many questions. So I spent some time, my family and I, trying to delve into these questions. And 6.5 years ago, my niece came to me and she said, Rita, you have to do something with this 1,200-year story you've pieced together so it doesn't get lost again. So let's make a film. So she thought it was going to take 3 months. And 6.5 years later, here we are. But my son's friend Kevin helped. He's a filmmaker, and he came over every Wednesday afternoon, and we spent 2 hours working on this. And after 4 years, we had 20 minutes. And with that 20 minutes, I was able to interest the O'Shaughnessy Foundation and got a generous grant from them. And then so much help. Film North, an organization that helps filmmakers make films, helped me. I took classes, and that's where I met Melody. And once I got a grant, I went to Melody and said, would you help me make this film? And over to you, Melody.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank TPT for having us at this wonderful event. And second of all, to thank Rita for being brave and vulnerable, because this was not an easy thing to do. In fact, when Rita first approached me about making this film, she wanted me to make a film about her great grandma. And that just, I mean, it was interesting, but I just saw there was something more there with Rita, and in her sort of Minnesotan way. She was trying hard not to cry a lot when we would meet, and she was very emotional, and I just didn't understand what was going on with her. And so really the film started over, and I picked up my camera and started filming, and along with Miles Painter, the editor, and another cinematographer on the film, we made a film about Rita and her journey. And that is what I was interested in. I wanted to know what she was going through. And I hope this film answered those questions for you.
Definitely, absolutely. Thank you so much to both of you. The next question I have is actually, I want to start off by reading 2 quotes in the documentary that stood out to me, that were so powerful to me. The first one was from Ramona. She says, "Who are my people and where do I come from? Knowing the answers to those questions creates such a foundation of identity." And Rita says shortly after this, "How am I supposed to grow up and have a picture of who I am if I don't know who I come from?" So my question, I'm going to start with Ramona, is why do you feel that it's important that everyone, including white folks, do this work in understanding their own history and stories of origin? And other folks can jump into the conversation after Ramona as well.
Thank you, Kevin, for that question. And yeah, I think for Native people, when we do our basic introduction in our language, the first thing we learn is to understand who our people are and where we come from. It's the most basic information. And from a group of people who have lived here for 12,000 years without a written oral language, it's very important for people to document, all of that information. But there's also a more foundational part, like when the basis of our identity is who we are. And if we know the answers to those questions, who are my people, it creates this very solid foundation. And that foundation is what upholds us when we have to manage bullying in the 3rd grade, right? Things like any kind of trauma or oppression, is knowing that all of those people, like I am still here because of my ancestors, all of those people have walked this before you, and we need to know who they are. We need to have an intimate relationship and knowledge of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ramona. I have a question for you, Ruben. What advice do you have for other folks who might have a story from their own history that they want to know more about, but who might not know where to start?
Yeah, I would say that you gotta ask your relatives, and and you might not know where that starts, but ask anyone. My little cousins, like recently, we're playing basketball, and we were talking about, oh, we're a basketball family. That's what I was saying, and my little cousin's like, do you know Grandpa Simon was a championship boxer? And he's 14, and I was like, no, I didn't know that. So it'll come from somewhere. Someone will tell me a story about my dad, like one of my dad's brothers or whoever, a story that my dad would never tell me, but just like random things like that. But I have a really good connection to my grandpa, and so I would say it usually comes from the elders. So we have people in the family that I don't know, I feel like all families might be different. But intergenerational families, you want to ask the elders because they've been around for a long time, and they'll know something that maybe all the family secrets or whatever. But yeah, I think it comes from the elders, but also ask your relatives.
Absolutely.
If I jump in for 1 second, Kevin?
Definitely. Yeah, feel free.
Yeah, I just want to say that when Rita and I first started working together, she was also very upset at me a lot about certain things we were working on and going this direction or that direction. And one of the things we talked about a lot was that she's a white person telling a story about Native Americans, and she was really, really concerned about that. Like, how do maybe she shouldn't be telling this story. Why is she telling this story? And I did try to continue to encourage her to tell her story, and that connecting with Ramona made those dots click, right? I think, and maybe Rita can talk about that a little bit, but I do feel that, as someone, I don't know, I just was interested in following Rita's journey with trying to understand what it means to be an immigrant, in this country, and her family, the colonists, the colonizers doing the colonizing, the colonists. I mean, there's all this mixed up stuff going on. And I just felt like following her doing that was her story, but she was worried about it. So I don't know if you, Rita and Ramona, want to talk about that briefly, because I know that came up a lot.
Well, you have to be thoughtful about delving into this stuff. Like in Ireland, it wasn't when I did that part of the story, I couldn't tell Irish history. I had to have an Irish person tell their history because I can get an approximation, but it's not good enough. So I did want to be, I wanted to be very thoughtful about how and what we tell and how. And I was so grateful to Ramona for being willing to join us, because we couldn't have done this without you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Did you have any other reflections that you wanted to add, Ramona?
I think that our story and what going to what Melody's talking about is native history has been told by other people, not by us. And so Rita was very respectful in the way that she entered into that conversation. In participating was that I was reinforcing those white narratives. And that never happened because of the authenticity that was created through the relationships. And that was really important. And I think that's what's moving about this film.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing those important points. At this point, I'm going to thank you so much for all the panelists. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to some of the questions from the audience. This is another reminder: if you are an audience member and you have a question, feel free to throw it into the chat box, and we'll do our best to ask it in the next 10 minutes. So first question is, who currently holds the title to the island right now? Or some of the other questions too is sort of what happened to the title of Pike Island, and what's happening with that?
Well, it belongs to the state of Minnesota. It's part of a state park, and that's where it exists now. And, I'm sure there'll be more conversations about it in the future, hopefully, but I do think that they are going to rename it at this point. Is that not a decision that's been made? To rename it the original Dakota name? Am I right about that, Ramona?
I know that has been something that's been said, but I don't know any more details.
For Rita, have you had any conversations with government officials about ownership of Pike Island, turning that over? Sort of how has those conversations gone? I know that was a big part of the film, but that was one of the questions from one of the audience members.
I did have conversations. Mostly I tried to do it with, I started with Native organizations and individuals because I wanted to know what they thought about this. And I got such varied responses that it just became clear this is not my job as a white person to get on a horse and go off into the, try to rescue something for someone that I am just not the person. So that's why the Indian Land Tenure Foundation was so important to me, because they have very solid base and priorities and resources and a mission. And so I along the way decided that that's the direction I wanted to follow. Rather than try to lead something, I wanted to follow Native people on these land ownership questions.
Definitely. Thank you so much. One question I have is, Rita and Ramona, how did you folks meet? There might be like a connection with like the Minnesota Humanities Center or the Badote. Did you want folks talk a little bit more about that?
My tech guy. So Rita was on some of the tours that we do through the Minnesota Humanities Center, Places of Power, Badote. And you went on several, right, Rita? And then she approached me and asked if I would be willing to do an interview. And I was, and I was because Rita had done her homework. Rita had a vision. She knew what she was doing. Sometimes I don't have a lot of time. And so I don't always have time to do those kind of things, unfortunately. But I knew that Rita had a mission, and I was definitely going to help her because she had done so much homework.
Definitely. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Rita?
Well, having met Ramona, any Dakota person who can stand up in front of white people repeatedly and take them on tours of these sacred, I mean, she's like a very wise and person who just has some idea about how to help people heal, but do it in a way that works for her too. So I noticed that, and I thought, if anybody can, help me with this project and do it in a way that's actually solid, it's Ramona. And you're just a very wise and a teacher, a brilliant teacher. So she was my first and only choice.
Most definitely. It is so powerful as a viewer of the documentary, just watching the relationship between the two of you. And like you said, like these relationships are such an important way in how action happens and how we make change in this world. So the next question is, as an educator, what resources can we pull into our classroom to expose students to these absent narratives? And I know we have a few educators on this panel, so feel free to answer.
I am so glad you asked that question. So yes, we are really in need for authentic curriculum. We have a 2010 legislation that says that all teachers must teach Dakota and Ojibwe authentic narrative in their classroom, but the teachers don't have tools. So there is legislation that Governor Walz is putting forward now that will give teachers those tools. It's called Indian Education for All, and it will provide all of the accurate curriculum. But right now there is a website, Minnesota Department of Education. They have a literature guide based on state standards. Louise Erdrich's Birch Bark Books has authentic books. And also I have a really great resource guide I'd be willing to share with anybody. It's mostly geared toward teachers. But yes, we are in need of good, authentic resources.
Definitely. Anybody else wanted to respond to that question?
I just put that we also have the discussion guide that is part of, it was sent to a lot of people before the screening today, but it's also on our website, and is available to be able to discuss the film, which also opens up a lot of other conversations. So you're welcome to go to our website, storiesIdidn'tknow.com, and also Minnesota Humanities Center. And a lot of people are putting links in here. This is exactly what we want, by the way, from the film, is to have these kind of conversations started. A lot of people will say to me, things like, well, how do you feel about the ending of the film? Like, what happened to Pike Island? There's a lot of this kind of discussion, but what's happening right now is what we really wanted from the film. Is we want other people to have these discussions. We want to open up questions and conversations, and that's what this is doing. And I'm just so grateful to hear the interest that people want to know more about what's the land that they live on. And a lot of us have that question after, for me, being involved in the film, and also for those of you who've been watching the film. We're all very curious about how we got that land, and what and who was there before. So, yeah. And people want to know about your music, Ruben. So maybe this is a good time to answer that. How does your
Absolutely.
identity inform your music? Yeah.
Definitely,
Sorry,
yeah.
Kevin.
Oh, it's no problem.
It's the teacher in me. Sorry.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you, Ruben, what are some ways do you see younger generations staying connected to the stories passed down by generations before them? And I know that you do a lot of that, or I've seen you do a lot of that through your music. So did you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I was gonna say like generally, um, I was gonna say like through tradition, and with tradition is like, or like, I guess Dakota culture is like our language. We don't, and I'm like a language advocate person. A lot of the time, I'm an intern for the Dakota Language Society, and I do a lot of work for that. And a lot of my new music is gonna have more Dakota language in it. But like when I feel like people, especially Americans who are like monolingual, any other language except English, you realize how dull English really is, and also how misconceptions and misspeaking is very easily in English. And in Dakota, if our own people are speaking Dakota, we're not, the words we say, it's like the thoughts we create are like the same that our ancestors used to think and create. So that would be my most biggest encouragement about how our generations are going to be inspired to tell stories, as if we can tell them in our own language. And then our cultures, as like contemporary as it is, telling our story might writing a rap song, and that's where my dream and where making music makes sense. Kids won't tap into something that they might think is boring, but like if you like meet them halfway and you're like, oh well, this is like music and it's like enjoyable. Or maybe you want to be a gamer and you stream, and then you're speaking Dakota, or you're telling your story, or you're doing whatever you want. You want to be a vlogger or something. I see our youth are picking up things like that, and that's the future that I see for our people. Is that we'll remember something and then adapt with that.
Absolutely. I think there's so much power in that sort of understanding the culture shifts, but there's still so many ways that we can preserve and keep alive what's important to us, and making it relevant to our own truths and our own skills and our own art forms. I think that's such a powerful response. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go over all of them, but I'm sure there'll be many more opportunities to engage with all of the wonderful panelists. So I want to say thank you one more time to our 4 panelists, Ramona, Ruben, Rita, and Melody. Thank you so much good knowledge shared during this conversation. And we are going to transition into the next part of our event today, which actually invites all of our audience members, the opportunity to share with one another during our breakout sessions. So just a couple of housekeeping things about our breakout sessions. Be curious, listen to understand, show respect, suspend judgment, note common ground and differences, be authentic, welcome authenticity, be purposeful and to the point. Each of your breakout sessions will be led by a facilitator who will have the questions that I'll be sharing in a few seconds. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to direct them to the facilitator in the room. The person will know who they are. And also, we want to make sure that everyone has enough time to answer. So also, please, as I reminded the panelists, please do your best to keep your responses short and succinct so that other folks can share their ideas in the room as well. So thank you so much. And we can hit the next slide for the first breakout session question. So in the film, Rita says, "Now that I know, I feel like I need to take some sort of action." How do you feel about her response to the story? She didn't know. At this point, all of us will be split into our different breakout sessions, and we'll be returning back in about 8 minutes. So we'll see everybody in about 8 minutes. All right. Welcome back, everybody. I think folks are slowly trickling back in. I hope you enjoy the conversation. I enjoy that conversation so much. We'll have a chance to do another one, but while we're waiting for folks to trickle back in, you can throw this response into the chat box. What were some of your key takeaways from the conversation that you just had? Throw in a few words, throw in a sentence. We don't have a lot of time to hear from everyone, but this will be a chance for all of us to sort of get to see or hear what happened. I see family connections. We are responsible for educating ourselves. Thank you, Julia. Inspired. Great. Where are we now is where we were before, the interconnectedness of history. Ramona, you incite excitement for change in education. Yes, I love that. So many other different responses. Feel free to continue reading them in the chat box, but we're going to keep it moving. If you could hit the next slide. Feel free to keep throwing your responses into the chat box, though. So for the next one, we will be asking the question. In the film, Ramona asks, who are you? Who are your people? Where do you come from? Do you know the answers to these questions? And are these answers important? We'll be jumping back into the breakout sessions again, this time with different people and different facilitators. But we hope your conversations are just as thoughtful. So at this moment, we'll be sending all of us into our different breakout rooms again, and we'll see you again in 8 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. As I said earlier, I hope those conversations were just as fruitful as the first conversation. I know I learned a lot from everyone who was a part of my group. That's the conclusion of today's event. Don't let the conversations end today. If you found something really interesting, if you want to ask and follow up questions with the folks who were part of the panel today, there's so many different ways to get involved. You can watch the film and lead a discussion yourself within your own community. You can find that at storiesitdidn'tknow.com. Also, an important reminder for folks who maybe haven't seen the documentary yet, if you've already registered for this event, all of you should have received a link to the documentary and a password to access it. Take that link and share it with anybody else who you think might want to watch it. The link will cut off on Tuesday night. But if you want to watch it again, reach out to the filmmakers. There will be probably more opportunities in the future to catch other events where this will be happening. I work on a project at Twin Cities PBS called Moving Lives Minnesota, and we do a lot of this work in trying to figure out the history of the stories of origin immigration in our state. If you have a story burning inside of you, I coordinate a program called Dear Minnesota, where folks write letters sharing their own stories of immigration and origin, reflecting about their own past and the past descendants. Please write a letter to us. I would love to read that and watch some of the other really amazing things happening Moving Lives MA.org right now. I'm registered for Learning from Place, Bedote, at the Minnesota Humanities Center. This is the event that we were talking about earlier where Ramona and Rita got the chance to know each other better. So follow up the Minnesota Humanities Center. You can also watch this program again. It'll be showing on Monday, Wednesday, and the Wednesday after that on TPT2, TPT Minnesota, and the other TPT Minnesota. And don't worry about writing all of this down. All of you will receive an email with more links and other resources that can help connect you to all the other really amazing things happening as a part of this project. But as a way of rounding out, please tell us in the chat about an action that you will take. I think that's one thing that I found really powerful in Rita's story, is she didn't sort of sit in the shame or the guilt or the anger of her figuring out this history. She made action happen. So what is an action that you want to take based on what you heard today? And also, all of you will be receiving a survey. Please take the time to fill out that survey. You'll have the chance to win a prize, courtesy of the Minnesota Humanities Center. So please fill out that survey and let us know how today went, if you enjoyed it or if you thought we could have done better in any other way. So we'll stay on for a little bit longer, but I actually want to give an opportunity. You can hit next slide. To say thank you to all of our partners today: Minnesota Humanities Center, Stories I Didn't Know, Twin Cities PBS, Moving Lives Minnesota. Thank you to everyone who came to be part of our audience today to see this event. Thank you to everyone who helped facilitate a breakout room. Thank you so much. And I actually want to give an opportunity to our 4 panelists, if you wanted to say goodbye or wave or do anything, any last words for our audience. Great. If not, thank you again, everybody. And you can look forward for an email sharing more information. But I cannot say thank you enough for all of you for joining us today. Thank you.